look at sort of custom analytics. Some would say there's too many analytics, but I think that, on the other hand, one analytics does not fit all. Is that proper English? So come on up, guys. Our moderator is Dave Ambrose, who is the mobile and social director of Travelzoo. Do I have that right? Yeah. Yes. So we should just say Moshel. So I'm just going to let them get started. And there you go.
So we go from that entertaining conversation to social analytics. Wah, wah, wah.
How much time do we have?
You have about 35 minutes.
So 30 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Everybody hear me? All right,
35.
Great. So my name is Dave Ambrose. I work at a company called Travelzoo, and I run their mobile and social business. It's been great chatting with you all. We've learned a ton on the social side, and we're still learning a lot in terms of where it's been, and the company's been around for 15 years. I've been chatting with these two guys probably for the last week in preparation for this panel, and one of the things before we started was I just wanted to give a proper background to both of them, one on the agency side and then one on the analytics, really looking at the intelligence side of what's going on the social business. So feel free, Eric, Teresa, to quickly introduce yourself, and then I just want to ask the audience some questions.
Sure. My name is Eric Berkowitz. I run product innovation for a company called Tracx. We are a New York-based social intelligence platform delivered as SaaS. I've been in the space for about 5 years previously with a company called Visible Technologies, also based out of New York, which is more into the social listening and monitoring space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa, Caro. I work for a full-service marketing agency for the social age called Engauge. We are located in Atlanta, which is where I reside, Columbus, Ohio, Orlando, and Pittsburgh. And I lead our social email and analytics teams and work on the delivery of content marketing.
Great, thanks. So just a quick poll. How many of you in the audience, either from the service provider side or a brand side or an agency side, either use some form of BI like Google Analytics or a third party, say like a Tracx, or your own? Just a quick poll. Okay, great. And then how many have written their own custom analytics software? Okay, great. And then what else does everyone use? Is it generally off-the-shelf solutions like a Google Analytics for the rest of the business? Interesting. Okay. So I think this is great then to kind of frame the discussion. So it would be great, Eric and Teresa, if you can kind of frame how you look at analytics in terms of the businesses that you work with, both in terms of what you service at Tracx, and then Teresa, the clients that you have. I think that'd be great for the panel or for the audience here.
Sure. So, we see at Tracx, the theme of this panel being kind of the commoditization of social analytics and platforms that provide that. And we certainly agree and kind of see this process happening where we've moved beyond kind of your traditional social KPIs, very simple things to measure like volume and sentiment, and maybe kind of progressing into a bit more deeper analytics around predictive intelligence and things like that. But we are seeing a lot more of a trend of people moving away from platforms and dashboards and things like that, and just looking for data. What they essentially want to integrate into their business is interesting ways of looking at data. So while this sounds counterintuitive coming from someone who works for one of the more robust social analytics platforms out there, we're seeing this rapid trend whereby in addition to having a platform on board, the thing people are looking for is to integrate data into their everyday business processes. So when we look at analytics, we certainly want to provide a really nice user interface and a way for people to easily sift through this massive amount of data in a way that kind of makes their workflow quite easy on a day-to-day basis. But we're also trying to get our data and our analytics into their kind of legacy systems that they've already embedded in their companies for years, if not decades by now, so that it's really just becoming a new layer of data into what they've kind of already been doing, which is marketing, selling, providing customer support, innovating products, providing kind of PR and HR services and things like that. So that's kind of my take on where things are going with analytics. I think we're going to see less of this kind of product-oriented deliverable, whether it's SaaS or something like that, and more of systems that are built with this open architecture so that people can just push this social data into their CRM system, into their kind of live chat systems, into their analytics systems, and just add that additional layer.
Well, at Engauge, before we even start to look at the tools like Tracx, we start off with the philosophy that social is not a strategy. Social instead is a component to your overarching strategy. So even if you come to Engauge and one of our solution offerings is social strategy, you'll see that the framework we provide back to you rolls up to your overarching business objectives. Most traditionally, sales, of course. Everything needs to come back down to sales. Awareness, if you have a new product, advocacy are important business high-level objectives. And then we build down to the social-specific strategy statements and those components that will help ladder back up to your business goals and objectives, and then the tactics. And then based on all of that, then we put together the requirements in terms of how are we going to measure success. And what's really important and what people tend to forget is there's two different pieces of looking at success. One is the channels themselves. How are you going to optimize Facebook? How are you going to optimize Twitter? But then how are you going to measure the success of those different channels working together, again, to roll back up again? For something that is a little bit more transactional, sometimes that's easier. For the clients we work with, which is more CPGs, restaurant, grocery, where the transaction actually happens on premise and not online, then that happens in the form of correlation. And so it ends up being a much more of a challenging process. But that's how we look at analytics and how it all boils together.
So one of the things that we talked about last week on the prep call, I said, Teresa, so when you're looking at analytics providers, what are you thinking about? And you said, Dave, I look at social not as a strategy but as a tactic. And my phone almost dropped when you said that. And I said, wow, that's really amazing from that perspective. But I think you mentioned something that's really important, which is looking at the client or the brand that you're working with to say what's the end objective on the business end, right? So we had a discussion yesterday at the pool, and we talked about CPG brands, right? I come from an online world. My whole background's within e-commerce, so everything to me is all about conversion tracking and looking at revenue back to sales. You talked about correlation. And for me to try and wrap my head around correlation around analytics, that's tremendously almost difficult because how do you do that from a performance-based marketer? And I think that's why you look at Facebook advertising and Twitter advertising is so successful in terms of performance-based marketers. But could you talk a little bit more about what you mean by correlation and how you're actually tactically measuring it? Like, what are the steps that you're looking at?
Definitely. So for those of us who have been in the marketing space for a while, we know there are certain, that we've all struggled in terms of CPGs and those kinds of transactions that don't happen online. And so things like Net Promoter Score, which is why it was exciting to see what Louddoor presented this morning. Net Promoter Score, lots of really smart statisticians, people a lot smarter than me, have correlated your Net Promoter Score to your actual sales. And so now we as social marketers are trying to then say, okay, Net Promoter Score, volume of conversation, share of voice compared to the competitor's sentiment, as accurately as we can get to sentiment, how does that then correlate to Net Promoter Score? That is a perfect example of, at the end of the day, we as marketers need to look at statistics that we've come to depend on that are leading indicators for sales. Net Promoter Score. Awareness and purchase intent. A lot of times we're putting a campaign into the market and, coming from the traditional space, there would never be a print or a TV advertising big multi-million-dollar campaign put into the market without some kind of brand pre- and post-survey put in place because they want to see how much it moved the needle. With social, we're not seeing that. We actually have to remind these marketers, hey, does somewhere in your organization, do you have some kind of brand tracker so we can at least see what kind of effect and we can start correlating? And then, of course, we had the conversation yesterday, and so I'll transition over that it's not a one-to-one. That effect may come down the path several months from now.
Yeah, and I guess the position that we take at Tracx when we hear things like that is, it's very difficult for us to predict exactly kind of how the data is going to be used. Is it going to be used to build a net promoter score? Is it going to be correlated against point of sale data? Is someone looking at influence a certain way versus another way? So the way we try to tackle that challenge is by making our kind of platform enable custom analytics. And a good example of that would be like influence. So everyone wants to be able to define an influencer score, but very few people define it the same way. So we looked at those kinds of clout type scores and realized that those were somewhat of kind of like a black box kind of methodology that we wanted to break open, because the way Teresa may define kind of a net promoter score, an influence score, any kind of analytical score would be very different than, say, someone on the brand side. And even a CPG company versus kind of a company in a different vertical will look at it very differently. So we'll break something like influence open into its components, like your reach, the amount of responses that you can generate, the quality of the responses. Are they text-based versus button clicks like retweets and likes? And then allow the end user to kind of package that up in the way that makes the most sense for them. So one user in our system may be kind of giving a bit more weight to reach when they're calculating influence, and someone else might be looking at the quality of the responses they're getting. And that's the approach we try to take with all of our analytics.
And so there's a great transition back. So a lot of what clients have been doing is calculating the value of their most valuable customer. Their most valuable customer has a tendency to spend X more dollars than any other consumer. So if you look at that consumer and then you consider how much from their advocacy, how much more they can generate. And I'm going to read a stat because I too am not very good at remembering stats, but there was a SAT metric stat from a couple years ago. So brand evangelists spend 13% more than the average consumer and refer business equal to 45% of the money they spend. So if you can look at the data you already have in-house, probably with your CRM organization around your most valuable customer, and then start using that as a proxy to the people who are advocating on your behalf. There's already studies out there. Hopefully, in terms of your fans on Facebook, they are your most valuable consumers. That can be questioned these days, and that's what we have to look deeper into. But in terms of those most valuable people, in terms of those people engaging with you, in terms of the ones saying, I love this brand, please go buy it, using those numbers as proxies is also a good way to start showing the value of social.
Great. So I was on Twitter this morning prepping for this panel, and I saw a tweet from BuzzFeed that they did some campaign with Virgin Mobile to kind of build up the hype for one of their products, and they captured purchase intent. And the interesting thing about BuzzFeed, for those that aren't familiar with it, to me it's a new version of Dig when Dig was in its prime, but it really bubbles up really popular, funny content. But each of the content pieces within BuzzFeed as a media property has viral analytics behind it, so it's completely public. And I think if you're an advertiser working with that publisher, you get to see actually what the consumers and the readers of that site are using. So that was one of the first things that I remember when I started my career. I was actually in this space within social. A lot of people said, how on earth do you measure this? This was the CPG and the Fortune 500. And then now coming to a complete e-commerce direct response model, I see it very clearly when we talked about last week on the call. You have social platforms, right? And then you have social analytics providers, and I agree with what we were talking about yesterday, that the data should be open, it should be public. In the case of BuzzFeed, that you can see it right there if you're running on their site. But it still doesn't seem that way. It still seems like there's secret sauce that people are hiding behind. It seems that, in a way we were talking about last week, you need to pay to play. So my other question for you two is, if you're a small brand, right, and you basically run campaigns on Facebook, running page post ads, for example, a few $100s a week, maybe you do some Twitter advertising. How do you work with the Tracx, or how do you work with someone else on the social analytics space without breaking the bank on one end of the spectrum? And then, Teresa, if you have clients that are maybe medium to larger size, what have you done? Any examples without naming the client in terms of building out the campaign for them? Because I think that would be helpful just to share with the audience of how you guys look at that.
Sure. So if you're a small brand and you have a limited budget to spend on social, I think what you really need to focus is on the analytics that really look at like content optimization, basically making sure you're getting the most bang for your buck, whether that's when you're going to send out a tweet, what that tweet will contain. So there's a lot of new platforms, many of which have been mentioned, already this week, that are springing up that really look at kind of how to craft the right message at the right time, and that's a lot of what Tracx looks like. We look at kind of distribution at days of the week, times of the day, what happens if you post in the morning versus the night, what happens if you include a link in your post or something like that. I think you had some stats around whether it kind of contained a question mark and the difference that would make.
That was from Guy yesterday from Twitter, who was talking about there's a 16 or 17% better correlation if you remove the question mark, and then if you include exclusive, it's a better chance of getting a click.
Right. So I think from an analytics perspective, we kind of need to look at kind of the content and optimizing it, and make sure that if you only have a limited amount of money and you can't really just blast Facebook with really expensive banner ads and things like that, you're really getting the most out of what you're doing.
For us as an agency, it would be so much easier for us if we could take a one-size-fits-all kind of approach and we could find one solution and we could put it on all of our clients. At the end of the day, that just doesn't work. We heard it in the past couple of days, there are different brands at different stages of social maturity. Some stages of social maturity, they're still very focused on the organic aspect of it, where there are others that have incorporated paid, where there are others doing even more advanced retargeting kinds of efforts. And we have all three, small, medium, and large, and so we can't go in with that one-size-fits-all solution. What we can do instead is, yes, it's this whole go slow to go fast kind of approach. Take the time to put together the strategic framework. For those just getting into this space, we're going to define current state and desired state and the roadmap in order to get there. And then we're based on that current state and what kind of resources and what kind of budget and how does leadership
so
look
Teresa,
at social.
hold on 1 second. So what is what's an example of a current state? Like, what are some things that you're measuring for an example?
Well, for us, it's in terms of measuring, a lot of it has to do with the type of resources that you have right now. So measurement is very dependent a lot of times on, do you have the money for the tools to do it automatically, or do you need people? So you're looking at people to do the man work of pulling it down, putting it into spreadsheets, putting into some kind of SaaS model or SPSS, all the way up to the tool that does it for you. And so that's a big part of that process, current state, desired state, that we have to look at is how much can we actually accomplish, how much can we actually measure, how much can we manipulate the data, and how many man hours versus automated hours can we look at. And that's how, in some cases, we're looking at particular clients and we're going native. The Facebook native community management tool is sufficient for many of our clients.
So
it does exactly what they need.
Insights, is that you're referring to?
Excuse me?
Facebook Page Insights, okay.
Going all the way to the other extreme of having a very expensive community management tool with other expensive insights tools incorporated into it, but from a return on investment perspective, it makes so much more sense because it makes the man hours more efficient. We can get data out that we couldn't get with just going native. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful.
And our role kind of on the product side of that would be to really take this kind of what we call outbound product kind of development approach, which is where we look at our customers and our partners and looking at the commonalities and the ways they're analyzing the data and bringing that as much kind of into the platform in an automated way as possible. So we have some very kind of strategic social media agency partners who build really insightful and compelling reports that we kind of understand maybe take 20 hours to build, and we say if we can automate that and bring it into the platform so that all you have to do is download that report, click a button, maybe kind of put a little bit of human analysis on top of it after the fact, we can really scale the business and make it a much more kind of achievable.
That's good.
Goal. Yeah.
Does anybody use Excel as their main measurement tool? Interesting.
It's okay, you can raise your hand. People still do it. Thank you.
Yes.
Right.
So on the boat yesterday, I was chatting with someone from a clothing brand, and one of the things that we were chatting about was I asked her a simple question: How do you measure your return on the stuff that you're posting on Facebook or Twitter? Since it's a clothing brand, you can shop online. My thoughts were just really on sales and transactions. And the very interesting thing about that discussion I had was, she said to me that she really uses Excel alongside the tools that's provided from a Twitter or Hootsuite or Facebook Page Insights. But the part that really stuck at me was, she was using existing kind of direct response performance marketing parameters that you would find in Google Analytics for UTM parameters, identifying the channel, the source, the medium, and she would build all that in terms of her links, and then pull that down into Excel and really identify by refer, by first click interaction, last click interaction, to kind of get a better top level insight of what was going on. And that's the reason I was asking about Excel, because it's an extremely powerful modeling tool to see what's there. And if you use, if you layer in exactly what she was saying in terms of other tools that's there, I think that's really powerful.
Well, and for those of us who've been in the digital space, like I used to manage Google keywords, and I used to manage email. Didn't we all start with spreadsheets? One of my clients back when I ran my own business had a really powerful direct response, a catalog kind of business, and he would say, here, let me show you my Excel workbook. I couldn't believe it. He was doing all his segmentation modeling in Excel, but we all start there. That's the same thing from a social maturity perspective in terms of the reporting and the analytics, is we're all starting, a lot of brands are starting on the analytics perspective, but then once it gets, now you're doing page post analysis and things like that, now you need to actually do the tool, and so it matures, and that you can show your business, your executives, that you need to invest in the tool to get the success. It was the same thing when I was managing 10,000 keywords in spreadsheets, and now we have Kensho. It's the same thing when I was doing all my email segmentation and spreadsheets, and now we have all of those modern day email service providers.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really helpful. So the other thing that I remember, 7 or 8 years ago was, you would have these amazingly complex social listening services, the Radian 6s of the world, and they're really, really expensive. And I think the Fortune 500 brands would be willing to spend that part of their marketing budgets. But one of the things that I also remember looking at all those different providers, there were literally so many out there, and that was 7 years ago. And I feel now that there's even more, but they're more specialized in terms of what's there. So I think, Eric, would be helpful that when you're designing the product for Tracx, and I think it was really interesting when we talked, that you see it as open, right? And the data systems between each platform should be able to be malleable, that you can move around things. Explain that logic as to why that's important, right? And why you took that approach rather than kind of doing hard coding into, say, the Facebook Graph API or the
Sure.
Ads API. That would be helpful. But, I think, and then Teresa, from your perspective, there's tons of options out there. How on earth do you even evaluate one from the many calls that you get, maybe as an agency or as a brand? So.
Sure. Yeah, so we certainly, in evaluating the market landscape, saw those what we call kind of niche tools, feature point tools, and there's two ways that I think about that. There's one that's industry specialized. I mean, there's a listening platform, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that's just for wineries. And in California, they've got like dozens, if not hundreds of wineries signed up because they're so good at doing that. And you see that with the Bluefins, with TV, and just lots of platforms specializing. And then there's actually just the functionality specialization. You have community management platforms, you have listening platforms, you have social management platforms. And the approach we took at Tracx was really not to specialize. We kind of took a bigger vision in that we want to build something that fits in basically across any large, mature enterprise looking to manage their social business. So the way we actually look at it is not in terms of industry-specific functionality, although from time to time we might build something for a very large customer of ours. We think more departmental use cases. We think, how do we help kind of move beyond monitoring, which kind of social listening was all about, monitoring, marketing, and things like that, to the other aspects of the enterprise. How do we sell more product through social? How do we provide better customer service? How does HR recruit better employees through social? How does PR put out fires better through social? So we actually think more about the departmental use cases and then build the functionality around that, and certainly have the workflow to allow each of those departments to communicate, work together, route the data to the right place. But that's kind of the way we think of it, because ultimately, whether you're a pharma business or a CPG business or whatever, your goals are relatively the same, which is to provide a higher level of marketing, sales, customer service across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's exactly what we do. It is overwhelming. My favorite article in Mashable this month is 49 digital services you may have missed, and that was just this month, 49. It's a lot you need to look at. So what do we type A personalities do? We create a list, and we determine what are our needs. And your point in terms of needs in the social space isn't just marketing. It's PR, it's branding, it's advertising, it's customer service. The innovation people love social. And so as an agency, we need to look across all those pieces. We're doing a review right now in terms of our community management tools, and before it was just community management, crisis communications, those types of things. Now we need to take into consideration, okay, are they going to do paid? Well, does this tool help us manage paid? So it's creating that list, it's prioritizing that list, because again, going back to the fact that resources are limited, specifically budget, you may not get everything you want, and so prioritizing that list. And then what's nice about an RFI, RFP process is you get to see the vendors and what kind of customer service they're going to give you. We went through this process, and I was amazed at how many vendors responded back to us saying, I'm sorry, but we're not going to participate. What? You're not going to participate? It's an RFI. You should have, like, it was not easy, not hard questions. Why aren't you going to participate? Well, that was a great sense for us. If they didn't want to participate there and help us there and educate us there, why would we want to do business with them moving forward? So it's a multi-step process, but again, going slow to go fast, at the end of the day, you come out with a solution that meets your needs for the most part and fits your budget. And then, yes, you need to continue to assess your situation, because what tools we chose last year is most likely going to be different this year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll remove my moderator hat and sit on the panelist hat for a quick second. When we looked at it from the Travelzoo perspective, we really only cared about two main business objectives, which were growing the audience from the 26 million subscribers and app downloads and Facebook and Twitter audience that we have, to also increasing the revenue. So it's the same exact thing, right? There's 50 new tools that you see that exist that we may have missed for that week. For us, a lot of the BI that we had was either pre-written, when it came to subscriber analytics, because it's a very direct response-driven business and performance marketing-based business in the travel space. But now we have these new tools that may exist inside of a Facebook or a Twitter from their programs that they already have on their monetization teams. But that may not be enough for us. So we've had to write some of our own code to facilitate that. We leverage Excel quite a bit, which is extremely powerful. And sometimes I move it to Google Docs if we want to take it on the go for the team. And then also we move it to what we run the business on for Google Analytics. I look at a lot of these tools a lot. And the one thing that I have a hard time kind of justifying where we are and really where we want to be on the social side for Travelzoo is does it increase the audience, and does it increase the revenue target that we want to hit, right? Because those are the two main business objectives. And it comes back to when I dropped the phone last week when we were talking about social is not a strategy, it's a tactic, and then we explained it's really around the business objectives, which is important. So, Kathy, I don't know how much time we have left, but...
Yeah, we have a few minutes for questions, but so continue with your thought.
Okay,
I'll stand up.
My last thought before we open up for questions was, and we talked about this on the phone, if you started from scratch today, right, and you were building Tracx right now from a product perspective, and you had no, Teresa, backlog of social analytics products that you could pick from, what would be the one thing that you would focus on, and drive forward when you're building the product, and what would be the one thing that you're focusing on now in 2013 in February for your clients to say, this is a must-have?
Sure. So I'll make it two things, but they'll be quick things. The first I've kind of harped on a little bit, which is just kind of this very kind of integratable product that would allow kind of maximum data fusion. I really don't think you can understand the true impact of social on your business unless you're directly overlaying it on your sales data, your CRM data, and things like that. So openness of the platform, and then scalability, but I don't mean it the way it's usually used in terms of everyone thinks volume when they think scalable. Just have to be able to suck in more and more data. Twitter and Facebook are growing so fast. I think the kind of often overlooked part of scalability is kind of the quality side, not the quantity. So new types of content are constantly being produced, and if you're just good at text analysis, then you're going to kind of miss the boat on some of the other concepts that were brought up earlier today, like picture analysis, video analysis, audio analysis. So I would build kind of a platform that's both scalable vertically but also horizontally.
And for us, you have business objectives over here, which your companies are working very hard to define, and you have your channel-specific metrics and KPIs over here. It's this space in the middle that as agencies, as brands, we need to get together in the room and hash out what are the correlations, what are the proxies, If you happen to be an e-commerce kind of company, what are the actuals that we're going to be able to track to show that this social component of your overarching strategy actually generated the business objectives that you want?
So do we have questions? Okay, I see Nathaniel. You're supposed to say your name and title, but do we know you by now? I don't know.
Say it again. I'm Nathaniel, Sapient Nitro. I'm really passionate about this specific area, and I want to hear your thoughts on the extent, or how critically you think the lack of data science is impacting our ability to understand and grow and innovate in how we engage with customers. And what I mean is, listening and analytics platforms have evolved. Some say they leverage big data approaches. Some don't. Some are still stuck in PR world. And language analytics and correlation and all that fun stuff we just talked about. We know that there's a huge upcoming gap. Once in data science. One stat says by 2014 there'd be a lack of 150,000 data science jobs in the U.S. alone. So how do you position yourselves for that? How do we help customers? How do we bridge that gap? And how much do you think it's really impacting us?
Sure, so I'll take a first stab, which is that I find kind of a bit shocking, as I think you do, in kind of the lack of investment in data science at a kind of analytics level. I mean, for example, we at Tracx are just starting to kind of ramp up the different types of kind of analysts we're bringing in cancer researchers. We're bringing in kind of people with PhDs in that kind of world that look at data the same way that viruses spread, and I think it's opening up a lot of new avenues for us. But with that said, there's a risk involved because typically to get really good at that really deep analytical level, you have to also invest a lot of time in implementation and getting an account kind of tuned according to what you think positive sentiment versus negative sentiment is, or what you think virality means, or how to predict something. So the better you want to be at that, I think the harder it becomes then to kind of scale your platform and get people onboarded quickly and get customers kind of moving through the process. So you kind of have to pick whether you want to be way deep into the analytics to the level where you're going to have to rely on your customers to kind of give you feedback on posts that you've collected and show kind of their representation of that, or do you want to be more of a platform that's quick to onboard and a little bit lighter on the science aspect? And that's just a choice I think each brand out there has to make.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, and this goes to the college students that are out there, is the understanding the data. Like I can talk a good game on terms of cluster analysis. I have no idea how to do it, but I at least understand enough to know when someone's doing it right and being able to take that data and then make it actionable. That's the key, is these marketing mathematicians are incredibly important these days. Yes, you have the branding ones, but you need the marketers that understand the data and understand what to do with the data and make that data actionable.
I was just going to say, have you heard of business objects before? I'm certain you have. I mean, I think that's a fantastic kind of object-oriented tool when you're trying to modify data when it fits the business needs. But it also comes from, I think, one of the topics of this summit has been for the last day and a half. Is there support from the top down to say, is there a data science role for the business? We actually have one for Travelzoo, but it makes sense, I think, for what we do in terms of all the numbers that we analyze. So when we build products from the ground up, in the case of, say, when we were building the mobile side of the business, we looked at a lot of different inputs that existed for the last 14 years to say, what can we model in terms of what we wanted to build? And I think when we look at the social side, it's still, in a case, we're still learning on that perspective, and even our data science, head is also learning about that side too from the inputs that we have. In a way that we have to kind of look to Twitter, or we have to look to Facebook as partners. What inputs do you have here that can also give us an insight that's meaningful for shares or tweets or retweets that's there? But I think business objects, for those that you don't know, when you can build a product in a warehouse, it's a warehouse of data in terms of kind of core aspects of your product, which could be purchases, deal IDs, photos, everything's there, and you can basically manipulate and run queries as to what you're looking for. And the best data scientists and the architects really use a tool like that to model what's going to make sense for the business. The question becomes if agencies have at certain sizes, if they actually have that type of role, because it's extremely useful when across all different functions, from marketing to product to kind of general management across the business.
Yeah, so I think that's it. But so please give these guys some applause. I don't know if we solved analytics, but we sure tried. So thanks, guys. So it's just about roundtable time, and after that there's lunch time, and after that there's activity time, and after that there's drink time, and after that there's eat time, and then maybe a little sleep in there. So a couple of things. I guess there are still slots in wave runners in particular. Which they look like jet skis to me. That I'm just saying. I was like, wave runner, really? Okay. And do we have room in other activities, John? Or we?
We do. It's just check the desk.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll update you.
It's gold fishing, parasailing, the aforementioned island hop. What?
Oh, she's the VP of Special Marketing.
Well, okay.
That's not right.
Okay.
We'll get that fixed.
And then lunch will be basically the same drill timing, not drill. That sounds too militaristic. As yesterday, which is to say, lunch will be at 12:45, and then we're going to have a sponsor lunch presentation from
Exact Target.
I mean, I knew the answer, but I'm just giving it over to you.
Yeah. So, I have a commercial break I need to make really quickly.
Oh, no,
very
not again.
quickly. Ken, just be cool. Earlier today, we heard from David, CEO of Louddoor. That brand opportunity, the brand satisfaction opportunity, is free to all you brands out there and agencies. So, Rick, raise your hand. Rick Meacham is right there. David forgot to mention that. That was a very important point. It's for a free study, a free opportunity. So, talk to Rick if you're interested in that. Thank you.
And also, my reminder is that tomorrow, because we keep changing when the keynotes start, just to keep you all on your toes. The opening keynote is at 8:30 tomorrow morning. It's going to be Brian Madden from Hearst Digital. So just remember that when you set your alarm clocks. Okay, so now let's break into roundtables. First, building a social e-commerce presence, which is going to be hosted by Brian Zweig. Did I say that right, Brian? Of Ampush. Yeah, just walk over there, Brian, and here's your table. You must cross the venue. Okay, what's the next one? Got to look. Oh, marketing using image-based social, or marketing using image-based special, as the case may be, with Teresa Caro, who's actually. Oh, see, we fixed it. Aren't we fast? So VP of Social Marketing at Engauge. That's almost as good as the Oreo ad, I have to say. So Teresa, as you know, is right here. Okay, I can't see what.
Talk to the consumer. Yep.
Back in this corner, right? That corner is talk to the consumers. I think we're going to have some of our as I said, some of our panelists from the consumer panel there, and Michelle is going to host that. And then finally, we have how to evaluate social analytics providers, and that is going to be Ann Acker from Rio SEO, and that's it, guys. So thanks for a great morning, and thanks for starting the applause, Ken.